For every battlefield, there's a proper weapon. I'm Sonnie, and today we're talking about a new strategy for a new fight on today's episode of PolitiChicks. Today I'm so lucky to be here with my brothers in the fight. Marvin Rogers, author of Silence Makes the Loudest Sound, Kevin Daniels, the president of the Frederick Douglass Foundation of North Carolina, and Pudgy Miller, host of the KIRP Keeping It Real with Pudgy radio show. In the 60s, men like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson were champions of a necessary cause. They stood with other civil rights icons against dogs, fire hoses, and socially accepted segregation. But my generation has never had to ride in the back of the bus, attend a segregated school, or look for a black-only water fountain. Instead, we seek choice in education, financial independence, and a shot at the real American dream. So guys, how do we get there?
Well, one way to get there is by replacing those two guys that you just mentioned. Because when I look at them, I look at, I equate it, I'm an athlete, so I love basketball. I look at it as I'm a Michael Jordan fan. Michael Jordan, at the age he is, with his health, he gained weight, his knees are bad, trying to chase around Kobe Bryant, LeBron James. It's outdated, it's time for him to go. I look at the same thing with Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. It gets to a time where they've been involved for so long that they're actually hurting the cause of the black community for us advancing. So it's time for them to sit down.
Yes, I respect their contribution to civil rights, but in 2012, it's time to elevate from civil rights to civil responsibility in our communities, with our families, with the small business sector, or what have you. President Barack Obama won the election by campaigning against 8 years of George W. Bush. But the question that demands an answer is that what are we going to do about the 45 years of failed liberal policies in urban communities, which have largely been embraced by the two men that you mentioned?
You campaign against them.
Absolutely.
Democratic leaders, man. I mean, let's call it what it is. I'll just speak on the black community. We've been voting Democrat for how many years? 45, 50 years, and we've gotten nowhere. So, I mean, if you equate it to those guys being the watchdogs or your bodyguards, Sonnie, if we were your bodyguards, I mean, seriously, you got to keep it real. If we're your bodyguards and you keep getting attacked by paparazzi or you get mugged or we're not doing our job, for 50 years, it's time to find somebody new. Yeah. So these guys are far outdated.
I think I would be on my Mitt Romney saying I like firing people at that point, because that's really where we are, is they don't want you to look at the results.
Yeah.
They want you to feel good about what they promise you. And what we have right now in the black community as far as results go is degradation. Nothing is getting better. It's continuing to get worse. So instead of let's not talk about them so much as go ahead and tell the public about some of your ideas, because we don't get this opportunity as much as we should. The opportunity to actually go out and tell them, if we are the new weapons, what are we bringing to the fight? What are we going to do different than those that have come before us?
Well, we need to promote enterprise in the communities. Most employment comes from the small business sector. I would say about 95 to 98%. But when you have policies that are coming down from D.C., from the president and from liberals that actually penalize success and penalize the small business sector, that's actually counterproductive to economic development.
School choice is another one. I look at a lot of the leaders that we have in the community, and I wonder how many of their children go to failing public schools. If they're making money, they're able to send their kids to a private school, a charter school. Just even if you're not making money, just to have that opportunity to choose a school for your child to go to. In North Carolina, we just raised the cap on charter schools and allowed that money, that little less than $8,000 that goes per pupil. Let the family decide on where they want to spend that money and what school, so their child can succeed.
I personally, education is my thing. I'm so huge on education, because if you limit the growth of a child, you just don't know where they're going to end up. And that's the problem in our community in large part as well. We don't have anybody teaching them what they need to know to survive. Instead, the educational institutions are teaching towards the end of the grade testing, which most of the educators don't want to teach to in the first place. So if we're going to get serious about correcting our neighborhoods and having real leaders, parents need to step up, churches need to step up, the state needs to step up and probably get off education so much and open up the floodgates, because all kids don't learn at the same pace. You know, some kids may test well, some kids don't. Some adults don't test well. Some adults can barely read because of the past educational problems we've had. So we gotta take a real serious look at what we're doing and correct it. Because if we don't address it ourselves as parents and become the leaders in the community ourselves, we're gonna continue to fail.
One of the things that I go through is, especially when I'm talking to a lot of black youth, and you know, we have a high dropout rate in the black community, and you go to them and you ask them, why did you drop out? And the main thing that they'll say is they weren't teaching me anything that I needed to know. Because in most of the schools, the public schools, they're teaching you Timmy wears a bra. They're teaching you global warming. They're teaching you liberal tendency policies. They're not teaching you mathematics. They're not teaching you science. They're not teaching you technology. And these are the things that are going to excel the next generation forward to be the money makers, to be the innovators, to be the producers.
Right.
And you know, they have a real problem on the left with producers. And so they actually run to the street. And I ask them all the time, what are they running to when they run to the street? What do you think it is when they're leaving the liberal bastion of public school? What are they running to when they run to the street?
They're running into trouble. All the time they're running into trouble, and nobody's addressing that. These parents are working their butts off. I'm sorry, they're working their ass off to provide a living for these kids and provide a living for themselves halfway decent. You know what I mean? And a lot of people, they can't even get a good job because they don't have the education themselves. So most parents want better for their kids, but they can't get better because they've been handcuffed. You know, you can't even look at a person who gets income tax. If you put $3,000 in the bank and you live in a project home, you lose that home. What's $3,000? Are you serious? Yeah. That can't even get a child in a private school for maybe a semester, more or less last a whole year. So it's all a joke, man. We got to get serious about taking care of our community.
I love what you said about the aversion to productivity. Sonnie, did you know that the fastest growing business sector in America between the 1870s and 1965 were urban-owned businesses? Well, what happened in 65 that caused it to taper off? Have you heard of the Great Society?
Yes.
Have you heard of urban renewal? So it's not that we're trying to bring some kind of like new concept to the community or trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to return the community back to that heritage of entrepreneurship, of taking the reins of your own destiny and not waiting for Uncle Sam to come in, gallop in and do it for us.
Okay, well, I want to make a challenge to you guys, and I want to make this challenge to every single black conservative out there, because we're often asked, and there's one black conservative that hasn't been asked this question, why are you a black conservative? So we're going to switch that question around to none of us ever answer that question again. The new stance is, why aren't you? And when we start to change the conversation, I think that we're going to get to a place where we can control it. This is our battlefield, this is our war, and we can run it as such. So what I'd like for each one of you is to quickly look into the camera and tell the black community the most important thing that you would have them to know about this new battlefield.
Okay, the new battlefield is not about creating traps, but it's about building ladders.
To me, the most important weapon that we need on the new battlefield is education. Because right now, the leaders that we have in the community, one job of a leader is to not only lead, but it's also to build and develop other leaders. Right now, we're creating leaders in the wrong categories. We have the highest dropout rate, highest incarceration rate, highest poverty rate. We have the highest, so on and so forth. We're leading in the wrong areas. So we need education. You know, there's one statistic that really struck me is that one criteria that they use to build prisons is based upon fourth grade test scores. Education is the key. Education is the key for people to start businesses, to own and operate them, to graduate school, get a successful job, whether you're graduating high school or you're going to a trade school. Education is the key all the way around. Learning when it comes to government, learning how the government functions, how it operates. What's the three branches of government? Learning what the Constitution is, and also I would say also another weapon is the family. There is not a society that's going to survive without a strong family. Two parents.
I'm just going to big myself up, Sonnie. I love being a black father. I think we need to start taking care of our families first and foremost. That's how we can beat some of these challenges. Be in the household, take care of our responsibilities at all costs. And number two, speaking on being a conservative, don't let anything define you. You define it. I define conservatism. It does not define me.
Okay, well, I've got to end this exactly where I began. For every war, there is a different weapon. The battlefield has changed, and it's time that the leaders change along with it. Thank you so much for watching this edition of PolitiChicks.tv, the right kind of PC.